Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. And in this video we are going to be continuing on with our C# tutorial series. And in this tutorial we are going to be talking about how we can use named arguments in C# at the call site of our methods that we create. Now if you're familiar with something like Swift, Swift also has this feature, and it doesn't, like, out of the box it's required. You can, in Swift, you can use an underscore to say, hey, I don't want to use any parameter labels, but C# doesn't require you to do this by default, unlike Swift. So here in C#, it works exactly the same as it would in, say, Swift, where we have the name of the parameter and a colon and then the value. So let's code a quick method, and then we can see exactly how we can do named arguments. So below our main method here, we're going to have a private static void print multiple times okay. Alright. So now inside of the parentheses we're going to have a couple parameters. Int iterations and string s. So we have two parameters. One is an integer for how many times we want whatever it is that s is to print. How many times we want that to print. So let's go ahead, and inside the body of the method we're going to say console, or actually instead of a console.writeLine, we're going to use a for loop for int I equals 0, I is less than iterations, I++, like that. And then inside of the for loop, we can do a console.writeLine s, like that. Alright, so now inside of our main method, when we call our method, we could do print multiple times, say 10, and hello world. Now, generally speaking, because we have two parameters here, it's not too complicated to figure out what these do, especially with the method being right below the main method, so we can see the signature and we can use, say, IntelliSense to figure out what parameters we need to pass to it. But assuming you're using some kind of library where there's a method that contains many parameters, and say many of them are integers, some of them are doubles, some of them are strings and booleans, you're going to get confused as to which parameter does what. So that's where named arguments come in. You can use the name of the argument and pair it with that value, so you can make your code a little bit more readable and understandable, not only to you, but future developers who go into your code and have to modify it, so they know, oh, this value corresponds with this argument. And it just makes it a lot easier to read. So what we can do is, inside of our method signature, right before the 10, we can say iterations, : And right before our string, we could say S, : And so now you can see the S and iterations changed from white or black, depending on what color theme you're using, to a completely different color. And that's because it recognizes them as the names of the specific arguments or parameters. And we don't have any errors either. So that's how you can put in those named arguments. But before I show you the results of our code here and the fact that it will compile and run, one thing to also note about using named arguments is because you're naming the arguments specifically, they don't necessarily have to be in order. Right, and we'll demonstrate that after we run our code here. So go ahead and do a Control F5. And you can see Hello World gets printed 10 times to the console, just like we expected it to, and it builds and runs just fine. But I did mention that this can be done out of order. So let's say print multiple times. We can have S go first, something to print, and then iterations 25. And so you can see we don't have any errors here either, because again, it just goes and looks at the names of the parameters and assigns them accordingly. It doesn't, when you're using the named arguments, it doesn't matter what order you pass them in as. So if we run our code, it builds and compiles just fine. And it prints out Hello World 10 times, and it prints out something to print 25 times, just like we told it to. So that pretty much does it for how you can use named arguments in C#. That's actually very useful, makes your code a lot cleaner and a lot more readable. Thank you all so very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.